everyone. This is Jim Nasser from the HBAR Foundry. Welcome to another HBAR Foundry Town Hall. Today we're going to do a developer deep dive and talk to a couple of prominent folks in the Hedera community, developers, independent developers, as well as longtime folks within the Swirl's Hedera community, and really kind of dive into some things that are of interest and concern to developers and builders in the community. As a form of introduction, this is the HBAR Foundry is a decentralized community of developers in the Hedera community. We have been around for about 4 years now. I believe it started in the summer of 2020 and has continued ever since and really grown. And I think these days we work with and represent many of the developers in this space. And the idea with the town halls really is to help bring topics and areas of interest and concern for the community, particularly for the builders, into this kind of a public forum, and have some key people in the space that we communicate with and learn from. So that being said, I have my partner, Ken Anderson, who is going to be helping to co-moderate this session. And Ken's also been a developer like myself for many, many years in the Hedera space, and was actually at Hedera for a number of years and Launchpad, and great amount of experience in the space. And then our two panelists today are Greg Scullard from Swirl's Labs. Greg has been there, one of the OGs for many, many years, as well as Milan, who is our kind of independent developer in the community, a great guy, lots and lots of work. But I will let them introduce themselves. So with that being said, Ken, would you like to maybe start and we go from there?
Yeah, I mean, we've known these guys for a long time, Greg and Milan. We've all been in the space together, and Greg and I worked together years ago and for years at Hedera, but not everybody in our community knows who you guys are. So why don't we start with you, Greg? Would you mind giving us an introduction? How did you get involved with Hedera? What are kind of the things that you focused on? Tell us how you got to where you are right now.
We got an hour, right? Hello, everyone. I'm going to try and keep this short, but I started in many ways thanks to Ken, who hired me in 2018, I think, six and a bit years ago, as a developer advocate. Back then, we didn't have a testnet. We probably didn't even really have much Hedera software. It was mostly an SDK called the Swirl's SDK, which is the core of the Hashgraph engine. So a few months tinkering with that, and then we got a testnet up together. We were planning for a worldwide hackathon across 6 or 7 cities around the world. We needed a Java or an SDK, so I wrote the first Java SDK, and we'll talk about developer experiences. Things have much improved since. And from then, I just became one of the subject matter experts, as my role demands, on all things Hedera. And I advise community, projects, enterprise, small, large startups, Fortune 100s, on how to build on Hedera. And if I don't have the answer, I know who to ask. So yeah, I guess that's me.
That's an incredibly important role, I got to tell you. And we'll get more into that too, specifically around the developer experience. But Milan, tell us a little bit about your who you are, what you represent, why you're here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ken and Jim, and great to see you again, Greg. Very, very excited to be here. So my name is Milan. Have been in this space about 3.5 years. 3.5 years now. Previously, I was a beekeeper. I was very active in the beekeeping sector, and then found out about Hedera. And everybody was talking around that time. It was, I think, early 2021. Was talking about blockchain, and I was always like, yeah, it doesn't really make sense. I don't see how we can apply. You can apply it in in real life and use cases. And then somebody pointed me to Hedera. I was like, okay, this is mind blowing. And from that moment on, I have been, my head has been on Hedera every single day, 7 days a week. So I started early 2021. I gave myself the Twitter name, which I still have the username, but not actively use, Hedera Dev. It was not because I was a developer at that time, but that I wanted to be a developer. So that was my mindset. I went for it. Figured out that it took me quite some time. So instead of going straight for developer, I started helping out as a community member, wherever I contribute, wherever I could. Started with GoMint, the first NFT marketplace on Hedera, which is pretty interesting because there was not yet NFTs natively on the Hedera network. So Alex Taylor, who started together with Richard McNamara, GoMint, Alex created a way to serialize fungible tokens. So those are little things that got excited. It's like, wow, that's so interesting. So from that moment on, I learned more and more. Started with APIs, with Matt Smithy's API, deployable serverless API instance called trust.enterprises. Was really brilliant. Got me really into the no coding stuff, where I started kind of understanding the logic of programming to build logic. You leveraging Hedera first, reading the mirror node, and then later on starting actually writing on the nodes, obviously sending transactions and so on. Became a team member of Earthlings. Created my honey traceability system built on Hedera. Last year I was one of the winners, third place of the hackathon. I created a way to verify your physical presence through a NFC tag, and then when you tag the NFC tag, you could get an NFT. That's now called. It was called GeoTaps, now Tapo, and great team that's working on that. And obviously, I'm also one of in the leadership of the HBAR Foundry. And this is where I wake up with and go to bed with. It's all about Hedera. That's every single day, and I love it.
Well, that's great, Milan. You've done a lot, and you've contributed to a lot of projects. So tell me, where do you start as a developer? What is your, how does the development journey start? What did it look like for you?
Yeah, sorry. Great question. So I guess it also depends on where you're coming from, right? So obviously my first response will be docs.hedera.com. That's great documentation. I always told myself, I still want to go from A to Z entirely through it, but generally I just jump to the pieces that I really need. And it also has some great examples, tutorials on how to start out, which I also used. Actually, there's also this repo on the Hedera GitHub that has all these examples that you can play around with. And apart from that, once you kind of, again, it depends where you're entering, where you start working with it. Because, for example, I've had several times that I onboarded developers on Hedera, just because I had, for example, an idea and I talked with developers that never heard about blockchain or never worked with blockchain, and told them about Hedera and kind of stand by them, and help them kind of figuring it out. Because one of the great things of Hedera, obviously, is the programming language is just JavaScript or Google Go and many others. So that's pretty easy. It's generally like that bridge between traditional programming and then the concepts of blockchain, how that piece works. And so that's kind of like helping them, standing by, helping them around. I enjoy doing that. And obviously there's also the bit, so where the developer journey starts, is if they're into the community, there are many people kind of standing by. And for example, we have Greg here. Greg has been amazing with me since the beginning. I've sent him the most ridiculous questions. If I look like now, when I look back to it, sending him probably on a Sunday morning or Saturday night, evening, hey, how does this work and why doesn't that work? And he's always there. So that's also big. Thanks. I'm using this opportunity, Greg. Big thanks. You are there, and that's so important. Because yeah. So that's developer relations, the documentations, and the community, obviously, right? The community being there, helping around. I got a big shout out from Danilo, who created the DEX integrator on Hedera, and then I also heard he had a shout out to May, and then it's great to see that, for example, May and I have from Hashback, we have a great relationship, but then we work parallel, helping other people out, other developers, and so that's. Sure.
And to be fair, Milan, I think Greg spoils all of us because you do a lot, Greg, and we'll get to you in a minute. But all I think the community appreciates that level of responsiveness, the level of competence, and just kind of support, because many times you can be lost, and it's great to have somebody who actually is there and it really kind of gets the community connection piece as well as the technical competence. Milan, before we leave you though, you did mention briefly that you do some work, and I know that a lot of your work earlier days were around using no-code platforms. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what tools did you use? What do you think about them? What's like the leading no-code technology that possibly developers can build from these days?
Yeah, great question. So there are actually different ways, and I've struggled with the term no code, because then people think, oh, it's like a suite where you just press some buttons and you mint something. No, it's more, maybe I should call it low code, no code. I don't know how to call it. Either way, it's there are several platforms, and the ones that I've used are, for example, it goes more towards workflow automation. And that's Zapier or make.com, for example. Those I combined, I created like little templates, and you could you could hook that up with Hedera, and you could make a little nice workflow. But what really created this huge realm of possibilities was with the software, which is, I believe, open source. It's called n8n.io. And basically, you've got this blank canvas, and you can use the completely programming logic that you want. So, for example, you start with a trigger, a daily trigger. What happens then? And you connect it to the next node where it says, mint an NFT where it says now where it gives the current time or something like that, and then log it to Excel sheet. So it's really, you're using tools, you're connecting tools that you're using daily, like Google Sheets or Airtable, and creating like this programming logic, and it's, there's a little bit of barrier. But it's really great to establish a certain programming logic and make something work, or make a prototype that is very quickly. Like you can make a rapid prototype. In a day you can have a working logic. That's amazing. And with n8n, kind of the cool thing is, I know there's a lot of possibilities with n8n, but it probably take a lot of time to build it. Those little nodes that I talked about, you can also contribute to those in their repository, and actually create Hedera nodes. So that's hopefully something in the future that might be created. But I'm looking forward to that.
No doubt. And I think we've seen that also around some ChatGPT plugins. I'm working with a new startup that's trying to enable Bubble, and Bubble is a leading no-code, low-code platform as well. So, but it's really good to see that, because, like you say, those templates, accelerate development, and you can focus on things that really matter in terms of the core functions, as opposed to kind of plumbing and things that we don't really need to repeat building from scratch. With that being said, Greg, can you give us just a sense for how to engage with Swells Labs. Of course, Swells is a leading developer for the network, and you mentioned your experience starting out the Java SDK from back in the day. But how do we engage, with people like yourself, Swells Labs, and other kind of development support?
Great question. Thanks, Jim. And so thanks for the comments earlier. And in many respects, I'm not alone, right? There's 13, well, actually 14 today, 12 developer advocates around the world, 5 in the US, 4 in Europe, and 3 in Asia Pacific. And so we try and cover, the globe when it comes to subject matter expertise. Some have deeper expertise in different areas. So you probably know, I don't know if the community does, some of the community certainly knows about Guardian, for example. So we look to have expertise in Guardian across all the regions. Likewise for DeFi, stablecoins, NFTs, and so on and so forth. So we try to make sure that we've got subject matter expertise, not only in the core technology, but also some of the verticals across all those geographies. The majority of that team is sort of involved in Discord, for example, which is often the first point of contact for developers with the community. The Discord server has been set up, I think, by Ken many years ago, and has survived, has gone through many different iterations as the needs for supporting the community grew across multiple SDKs, multiple services on the Hedera network, and also more of a general discourse around DeFi and away from just pure tech, where the Discord used to be mostly about technology, and in fact we used to push people away whenever they wanted to talk about token price. It is still a healthy environment, and one of the things that I've noticed particularly is that the community is a lot more self-supporting within Discord nowadays. We tend to have to answer the more pointy questions that not everyone has an answer to, but it's a good place to start. The challenge with Discord, however, is it's not really searchable. It's hard to find information that may have been posted a few days ago. More recently, we've done a few things. First, we've added AI tooling to Discord with something called Kappa. So you can actually ask an AI within Discord to give you answers, and that can be useful. Although we know AI can hallucinate every now and again, so it's always worth double checking what the AI says. But in order to make things or make information more readily available through the likes of Google Search, for example, or any other search engine that you prefer, we've started to migrate a lot of data or a lot of questions to Stack Overflow. So we've had a concerted effort in the last few months to essentially copy-paste relevant or useful Discord questions into Stack Overflow and provide answers there, because I believe that Stack Overflow is a much better tool for technical support than Discord, because it is searchable. It is threaded. You can see all the answers in relation to a particular thread. Discord is great for conversation, but it's not perfect or not ideal for technical support, in my opinion, anyway. So definitely worth checking out Stack Overflow, and I would encourage everyone to ask questions in Stack Overflow because they can be found, and they're immutably stored in Stack Overflow for later reference. And again, more recently with AI, we've built something called Hedera HiveMind, which is a coding assistant using ChatGPT. And again, this can help or assist. Again, bear in mind hallucinations. then those are different ways in which you can get support. Although clearly ChatGPT and Kappa don't work for Swells Labs, so Discord and Stack Overflow are primary ways of getting help from us.
All right, awesome. Yeah, that's very helpful, and I would definitely echo, at least personally, the experience with Discord. One last question for me before, I think Ken is going to go a different path. And Milan did a very good job just explaining how to get going as a developer. But from your perspective, Greg, do you see like a learning critical path? Like, is there if you're a brand new developer with no real Hedera background, what do you see as kind of like the critical path to accelerate your learning?
Great question again. So that's one of the tougher roles or tougher jobs for the developer evangelist team. We as DAs don't necessarily get deeply involved in the kind of learning experience from developers. But I know that the developer evangelist team is very actively engaged in trying to understand how developers are landing on our different resources, understanding how they navigate through those resources, where they stop navigating and why they may stop navigating. And developers come from different backgrounds, right? Some will have deep Solidity experience and want to understand how to deploy a contract on Hedera. Others may have next to zero blockchain or DLT experience. And are curious about, what is this thing called Web3, and everything in between. So we try through our documentation and through the way the docs.hedera.com that Milan mentioned earlier is structured to sort of address all these different needs with some coded examples, some tutorials. We recently launched an online course at the end of which you get a certificate, which is actually an NFT on the Hedera network. So, go clinch your NFT from the training course. But we also find that, as Milan said, because of Hedera's ability to enable use cases without smart contracts, those JavaScript developers, Java developers, Golang developers can approach and interact with the network in a language that's native to them. They don't have to learn Solidity, for example, from scratch or some other obscure smart contract language. And we find that a lot of developers, or even people I speak to, I've had many cases where I'll come off a call and having explained the Hedera token service, and 15 minutes later I get an email saying, hey, I've created a token. That doesn't happen if you have to learn Solidity and hard hat and all of the tooling that comes with it. But if you're familiar with JavaScript or Java tooling, then you can do those things really, really quickly. And that potentially is then a foot in the door for those developers to go and either continue with their kind of Web 2 development experience using the services Hedera provides, or to go discover Solidity, pick up some templates from the likes of OpenZeppelin, deploy them on the Hedera network, and start exploring what this world of smart contracts is all about. So many different ways in, many different ways out, but I think generally we get very good feedback on the quality of our documentation, the quality of the SDKs, it's generally relatively easy to get started on Hedera.
So, Greg, I know you mentioned that you're maybe not as involved with kind of the entry point, the landing point of a lot of developers, but I do know that you're very much involved in a lot of the enterprise use cases, POCs, exploration. Tell us a little bit about that enterprise experience. Like, what does that developer experience look like?
More often than not, it will start with a call. Kind of a traditional sales call, not really sales, but discovery of what is Hedera about, and that can start from we know nothing. We, as in whoever we're talking to, knows very little and is exploring Hedera versus a Polygon, a Solana, or whatever else, and we have to explain the technology in detail, and then hopefully after we've done that, they make their selection and choose to build on Hedera, and we'll typically we may have a workshop with them. We actually used to fly to large organizations to actually do whiteboard workshopping, working out what the use case looks like and trying to map out how this could be done on the Hedera network. It seems that people are now mostly working from home, so a lot of this stuff now happens over Zoom, which is good, which is okay, and certainly saves a lot of carbon emissions. We'll typically have an intro call. We sometimes have to undo some learnings from past networks, introducing the notion of native services like native token service or the Hedera consensus service and things you can do without smart contracts, because a lot of enterprise blockchain developers have trained and learned on Ethereum, and they often come to Hedera with an expectation that it's like Ethereum and everything you do through smart contracts. So we have to do a bit of unlearning there as well. And generally, we find that those developers with a bit of a nudge in the right direction, which is here's where the SDKs are, here's where the examples are, here's where the documentation is, become very self-sufficient very quickly. It's because, I think it's a lot harder for somebody to figure out how to write Solidity and make hard hat work than it is to take one of our SDKs, compiled 10 lines of JavaScript SDK and have a token created. In fact, the harder piece often is creating a wallet on the network and understanding what that thing is. The code itself is relatively straightforward. So, and then moving on from there, we'll, as we do with many of our community projects, we'll, as a DA team, we'll set up a Slack channel or some other means of regular communication, so we can check in, we can respond to questions efficiently, and we'll do the same with any project that wants our help. And then finally, I'd just say that there are occasions where Discord is where we find enterprises, and it is one area where I personally have always been very mindful to be respectful of whoever I'm talking to on Discord, because behind those handles, sometimes you'll find there's a CTO, and you just have to talk to them, not like a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old. So you never know really where those enterprise developers are, and we treat everyone with respect and professionalism.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important and very insightful too. I think we've had our discussions before in the Foundry, for example. So sometimes you go work with an enterprise, maybe Swirlds Labs is brought in to help hone in a use case or help them understand the technology, and you're talking to some of these developers and they're working at this enterprise during the day, and at night they're passionate about Web3. They're out exploring projects and technologies. So I think we always have to remember that we don't always know who's going to be the enterprise influencer, the one who's going to be inside the enterprise advocating for the technology. So I do recognize that. I mean, it's been like that from the beginning, Greg. You've always been in Discord and respectful and responsive in there to the people in the community. But speaking of the community, Milan, you're very much involved in the community. You're very much a grassroots startup kind of guy. How does that experience differ from what Greg just talked about with the enterprise experience?
Yeah.
Or how is it the same?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we don't go with the whiteboards, that's for sure. Well, although I believe there are quite a lot of developers that actually have their own whiteboards. I used to have my whole wall here was one big whiteboard. Bought a plastic sheet and just put it over the wall, and then I could draw all my things on it, my ideas. But yeah, I think I think it's really the big difference, and obviously there are kind of like nuances in that, because when you get that switch of getting the enterprise developer to indeed go back home and then to dive in further Web3 projects, as long as Hedera, obviously, then or Web3 in general, that's kind of what you want. I mean, you want to see with community developers, the people I interact with daily, that I meet and speak with. They are so intrinsically motivated, right? We all know why we're here on this network. It's how we know the difference, we see the vision, we know what the potential is, and many of us are so excited about being able to innovate, to create a lot of awesome, cool stuff. I mean, my biggest problem is time. I would love to have like an X10 on my time, and being able to constantly build all these awesome things. And so that it's really that intrinsic motivation that not necessarily having as a person, when I'm talking about these, the community developers, having kind of like an assignment. Oh, I have to build this and I will do it. I'm getting paid. I have to build this and I'll do it. And it's probably getting done. It is, hey, I want to build this and I'm going to make it super cool. And I'm going to work through the night and I'm going to wake up early, or maybe I won't sleep because I'm going to do this and it's going to be amazing. And if it's not amazing, I'll figure something out, or I'll get together with some other people and we're going to push innovation. We're going to create new things, and being really that, having these grassroots developers that are day in, day out working on this network. I mean, there are a lot of them, not necessarily only developers. I'm talking about community members in general, people who are creating content about Hedera, or talking about developers, but also builders that maybe not necessarily know a lot about development itself, but are pushing these ideas that they want to create because they have this vision on the network. And that is, I think, if I compare that, that's kind of like the biggest difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. And to me, like, people, the grassroots, having that intrinsic motivation, it's like gold. You want to do everything to capture that, to nurture that. And obviously now when Greg, for example, or his colleagues are working with the enterprise developers, then the most awesome thing to happen is when they turn, they get this intrinsic motivation, going back to home and saying, wow, this is really cool. I'm going to do this and that. And then tomorrow or next week, I'm going to show this to my boss. I have this idea, right? And I'm going to push for it, and I can make a case of it because I've tried it and I know it works, and I'm going to do it. That's for me how I feel about it and how I see it.
Yeah, I think there's kind of like a connecting thread between what both of you talked about. It's like, when we look at the enterprises, it's not like the enterprise is making decisions or getting work done on its own. There are people in the enterprise that are doing that work and making those decisions. And I think, Milan, maybe aligned with your experience, which is like, once you learn what this technology can do, once you learn how it's different, and you start coming up with ideas of what you can do exciting. I've seen a number of the enterprise developers at night go and do hobby projects, and then they work the enterprise during the day. Greg, you might have seen something similar.
Yeah. I mean, even hackathons, that work that happen at weekends or run over a long period of time, over several weeks. A lot of hackathon participants are, have a day job, but they just love what they do. It's not a job anymore in many respects. It's a hobby. Maybe trying to make a bit of money on the side or trying to learn something new through a hackathon is also something that that they do. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Greg, that's it's interesting. You mentioned hackathons. I think we've all, in recent times, like I remember 2 years ago, maybe there was a whole hackathon around HTS, when the token service came out. And of course, before that, it was around HCS and smart contracts a little bit later. But as a segue, in recent times, we've heard that Hedera has been doing with the technology roadmap. There's been some new priorities and also a significant amount of work around this concept of modularization. Can you elaborate on that? Like, what does that really mean? Like, what's the impact on the network? What's the impact on the builders?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, with any software development, particularly, when it's fast-paced and urgent and sort of nascent, early days, you develop as fast as you can. You have a relatively small team, and you do what is needed to get the software out the door as quickly as possible. And it can quickly turn to spaghetti code. And the analogy I can think of is if you're letting vine grow, or ivy, and the irony of the Hedera relationship here isn't lost on me. If you let ivy grow on a wall, it eventually overtakes everything, and you can't follow a thread from one piece to another. It's just a complete mess. And particularly with software development, as you're growing the team, when you wiggle one piece of the software on one side, and that has an impact further down the line on something else that somebody else is working on, or you have pull requests in GitHub that touch so many parts of the code that you can't work on more than one at once, and it takes an awful lot of effort to verify and check everything, then you get into a highly inefficient work environment. It's okay if it's a small team, but if you have a team of 20 plus developers, then it becomes very, very hard. Moreover, we have multiple services on the Hedera network. We don't just have the EVM. We have tokens, we have consensus, we have smart contracts. We may have others in the future. And we need to be able to work on those independently so that we can deploy HIPs faster, so that we can respond to community demand for features faster. And we were getting to the point where that wasn't happening. The team was growing, but the velocity in terms of features wasn't sort of growing in line with the team size. It was becoming, the friction amongst the team was getting harder to manage because of, not between people, but overlapping work. The software was arguably more buggy. I don't know that I've got numbers on this, but I would argue that over time it would just become less and less maintainable. So a decision was made just over a year ago to tear down the ivy and start putting lattice on the wall so that we can actually see what we're doing. And that's what we call modularization. So everything has been broken up into small modular, single purpose blocks. I'm not super close to the development work that's happened, but for those that understand microservices, I can imagine that this is pretty much what's been done. Everything has been broken down to very simple units of code that have a purpose in life, and that's all they do. So that enables the team to be far more efficient. It means that we can work on multiple parts of the code in isolation without stepping on each other's toes. And I think what's also very important, and not to forget, is that the code today is public. I would argue it's not open source in the true sense of the word. And we are working towards properly open sourcing the code. That means having a actual open source governance over the code. And in order to, and so that we can invite developers to participate in the building of the software that makes Hedera run. And for that, we needed to have software that was modular, that was easy to maintain, easy to onboard, easy to learn, and easy to modify. We couldn't have done it with the wall of Ivy that we had, a year ago. So that's really what it means. More stable code. In fact, I'll let you into a bit of a secret. We had a bug bounty some time ago, identified an issue with the network. It's since been fixed. And we were looking at, we fixed it on the old or the current code, but modularization had already fixed the problem, because I think it was related to pricing. The price calculation for something was done in one place and not 3 different ones where it was not the same in all 3 places. So that's an example where modularization actually fixed problems we didn't even know of at the time. And that was a great sign that this was a positive move forwards. It also improves testing. We can test each module independently. We don't have to run full suites of tests on everything every time we make a change. It's just it should make everything better, safer, more stable, and more easily acceptable by the open source community when the source code is properly open sourced.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on those points, Greg. We do, as example at Acor, we've been doing microservices development for years, but I also remember a few years ago going from kind of much more spaghetti code, like you say, to this more atomic, functional kind of containers and microservices pattern. And it's a transition. It's not easy. It definitely does make testing, scaling, security, I think a whole lot more kind of objectively measurable and easier if you do it correctly. Milan, I do want to kind of switch to you a little bit. Greg mentioned testing. I know you've done a lot of work, like including some of the work that you did with us at Acor on our Acor Labs IoT innovation. And testing is always obviously a big concern for any developer, and certainly when you're talking about using a public network, and for instance, dealing with things on testnet or testing on testnet or PreviewNet before that, and possibly using HBARs after testings, because it's more than just building something that's isolated. You're using the public network. So can you just give me a little bit, or give us a little bit of your experience in testing and what kind of concerns you've had, and maybe Greg, you and Milan can reflect on, is that going to get better once this modularization work has been completed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in terms of testing, that was a great, awesome use case for Acor Labs, the IoT devices, and we've got some great IoT use cases being worked on Hedera with Neuron and Wiercx and some others, I believe. Testing obviously is super important, and so one is obviously when you're creating something, it's the obvious choice, right, to use testnet and start testing your idea into practice. The other one is obviously with people that have an actually functioning, I would say, company or application built on Hedera, being dependent on that. They need to be able to obviously run the test that it's any updates in the future updates to mainnet doesn't break their application there. And with that, I think there are probably some challenges. I would say, I think one of the things is the faucet that has been reduced. I think a few months back, I think we used to get about 10,000 HBAR per 24 hours, or top to 10,000 HBAR, and that has been reduced to 100 HBAR if I'm correctly. And obviously, sorry?
Thousands.
Thousands. So and you can I think for many people probably enough, but there's also you could think, hey, a reduction of these H bar are, the H bar were perhaps very needed for some other applications to run their tests. And I know there's a lot of tests that are being done on engineering level, but at the same time, I mean, they're the community developers that also find bugs by running their own tests. So I think that's kind of like a balance that still need to be more figured out. And I know obviously you can run your own node, but I think there's also challenges with that in terms of doesn't completely see it as an entire network. It just runs on your local machine. Again, that goes very deep. I'm not yet deep in terms of my expertise, but I think it definitely is something we can improve on. In terms of testability, I believe also that and that also maybe jumps into the Ethereum EVM question, is where to my knowledge Hedera is not integrated the Hedera EVM into Hardhat. So which that means that it doesn't allows for snapshots, rollbacks, and manipulation of time. So you have to run it on testnets. You have to do live shooting, and those are, I guess, challenges that we can definitely improve on as a network. Yeah.
So let me ask you. Since you raised, and Greg, yeah, feel free to add to this. You talked about kind of the faucet and how that applies for testnet. But to me, this actually kind of plays into a bigger question on the Hedera roadmap. And I think it was newly revised, and a few things, there were maybe a couple of surprises for some folks in the community. So maybe you can reflect on that a little bit. And just did anything stand out to you? Did anything surprise you? Milan, and then maybe Greg, you can reflect on it as well.
Sorry, I got myself muted. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the roadmap, obviously, one of the things I think that we saw recently is that the community nodes were removed from the roadmap. And probably there are obvious reasons. I mean, it's again, a roadmap is it's not clear, like as in it will be delivered. It's something you strive for, to my understanding. And perhaps also with the network revenue, it's not yet a priority, which I entirely understand. Also, I mean, there's the frictionless airdrop, which kind of intrigues me. I mean, it seems like a quite I wouldn't say complicated, but there are a lot of moving parts, and I quite like the way that you can accept or not accept an airdrop. But I would be very interested to see how that would work in practice. So yeah, those are kind of my things on the roadmap.
Greg, how about
you? Thanks, Milan. Yeah, I mean, point taken on some of the hard hat fixtures, I think they're called, for snapshots and rollback. It's something that we're working on, that we're trying to figure out how to get this to work. It will probably be something that you can do on local node, or something recent that we call Solo, which is actually an entire Hedera network that you can run on your desktop or in the cloud. It's all using Kubernetes, so it's easy to cloud deploy your own instance of a Hedera network, which will be more like the real thing than a single node would be. There's other challenges you haven't mentioned, which we're working on, or rather the wallet community is working on, which is to make wallets and extensions actually work with local nodes. Because if you're testing a dApp and you can't, have your wallet connect to a local node, then you can't do, full kind of testing of those different flows. So these are gaps that we're plugging. On the on the roadmap specifically, yeah, I mean, it's a living and breathing document. Hand on my heart, I think and I've been in this industry now for too long, 30 plus years. I don't think there's a hard and fast rule on how you should present a roadmap. Different organizations have different views. We've done different things or within the Hedera ecosystem over time. But I think we should recognize that we're in a highly volatile and changing environment. And anything that we try and plan for in the next 3 to 6 months is always subject to change. Beyond 6 months, a year is aspirational at best, given that who really knows what is going to be needed in months from now. So an example is the frictionless airdrop. I mean, it's been in the works for a long time. Modularization has taken a fair chunk of time this year, but it's responding to demands from projects that we've got this love-hate relationship with token association. I think it's probably 50-50 in the community. Some love it, some hate it, and some projects need to be able to do airdrops. And we wanted to make it possible for those projects to perform those airdrops while not enabling malicious airdrops to become prevalent. So it's finding that right balance between the two, and working on different game theories to make sure that this airdrop facility is used meaningfully and isn't used to abuse people's wallets. So yeah, time will tell if it's good. It's innovative. I think it's different. I think a lot of other networks are wrestling with this notion of should we not allow airdrops, for the same reasons that our community is split. And I'm seeing lots of networks saying, or community members in other networks saying we should be able to block, airdrops to our wallets. So it's interesting to see that evolution over time. Yeah, I mean, back to the roadmap. I think one thing that we'll most likely see in the months to come is far more features, far more velocity, thanks to modularization. I think there's 6 HIPs on the roadmap at the moment in the near term. This is more than we've done, in many months prior to modularization. So yeah, I'm expecting great things.
Wonderful. Well, and kind of talking about where we're going, we talked a lot about where we came from, how we got to here, what are some of the changes in the developer experience over the years. But I kind of want to give a little bit of time to Milan, maybe to ask for things, request things, or maybe to complain and vent if you want. But what are some things you'd like to see improved?
Yeah. Am I unmuted? Yes. So that's yeah. Thank you, Ken. So I mean, this goes further. It goes further for me than like only really purely developing, right, coding on Hedera. It's really about what we need on grassroots level. It directly relates to the intrinsically motivated people. So what we've seen recently, obviously, the what's going on in the Hedera ecosystem in terms of like some data has come out on compensation, and which is not a necessary problem on its own. It's more about, hey, does it match up with the support that we've gotten? I'm in contact with a lot of people, and there's this constant reigning culture of I'm going to be pretty raw here. Apologies, not apologies, but I'm just going to say it's really a culture of lack of accountability and non-responsiveness. That's something, and that's really within the leadership within the Hedera organizations. So that's something that as a builder I cannot live with, and that's really tough. I mean, this takes it occupies a big part of my my mental health, I would say, because I'm here because I'm intrinsically motivated. I'm here because I want to build on Hedera. But if you see that leadership does not seem to really care about the people, the grassroots who are building on Hedera, who are contributing on to the network, who are the ones who are buying HBAR. I mean, we should not forget that that's kind of what is paying for the network for a lot of salaries. It's pretty tough. I'm gonna say it's bluntly, it's tough for a builder to see that and to kind of doubting, hey, is this going to change? So putting it out there, we need an ecosystem-wide leadership reset. We need a giraffe, in other words. That is, you can't ignore it. We can't just live on enterprise or the idea of enterprise, because we need those intrinsic motivated people. Those are the lifeblood of the ecosystem, and those are the ones that are going to nurture them, take care of them. We need 1,000 Gregs, to be there. I'm going to, I said it in the beginning, Greg, I'm going to say it again. You've been really amazing, and you are consistently, maybe you've even joined more often the Foundry calls, the roots of the voice, the pulse of the builders on Hedera. You've consistently joined those meetings, right? And we need more. We need to have that relationship with the leadership, and and otherwise it's going to be pretty tough for the intrinsic motivated builders to keep building. So
yeah,
those were the few words I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, just to clarify, Greg and all the DAs are stellar. They're incredible resources, and they've put in a ton of hard work. I think what I'm hearing from you, though, is there's a misalignment between the leadership right now in the Hedera ecosystem and the things that motivate the community, the builders, even the retail folks who are non-builders, right? The people who are speculating in the space or maybe engaged in a lot of the NFT stuff. And it's more of a community building thing. There's kind of like this fundamental misalignment. So, and what you said is that we need a reset of that culture. And I think that's the ask that you're saying is, like, if you were to have a magic wand, what would you change? It would be leadership aligning itself with the communities, the things that make the community go, right? That gets the community excited. And I think we're all hopeful for that. That's the reason why the Foundry is here, is to represent that community voice. And with that, we're coming to the end of this. I want to thank you both for making time for us today to talk about the developer experience, both the historical stuff and kind of the journey and what to expect and where we should be going next. But kind of to plug the Foundry, Milan's last point, that's kind of the point of the Foundry, is that we're there to support each other. We're kind of encouraging each other in our intrinsic motivations. We're helping each other navigate maybe some of the friction points and challenges, but we're also representing that voice and taking that voice to the leadership, because we really want that alignment. This technology is incredible. There's still not another protocol out there that competes with Hedera as a public network, and it's just a matter of making sure that everybody's interests and motivations are aligned. And so again, I'd like to encourage anybody who's listening to come to hbarfoundry.com, join the group, join the community, join the discussion. All we ask is that you fill out the form on the website. Then we'll have one of the team members review it and just vet it to make sure we're not loading up the Foundry community with spammers. We want people who are builders. We want people who are interested in this. And even if you're not a builder, if you're a retail or a marketing person, but you have something to contribute and you have that intrinsic motivation, as Milan mentioned it, absolutely come join us in the Foundry. We have our calls on Mondays and Fridays. And so we look forward to seeing you all there. We try to do these town halls every month. So we have another one pending for next month. Announcements will go out. Watch our LinkedIn and Twitter and YouTube for those announcements, and join the Foundry. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.